Welcome everyone to It Tastes Different Gaming Podcast with four different flavors coming from four different gamers. I am your host Shane Eisterhold, and I'd like to welcome my co-host Nick Irwin, Patrick Smith, and Russell Rowe.
Hey Patrick, where can they find us?
Well, the first place you should check out is our website at ittastes.different.com. This is the place where you can subscribe to all of our streams and connect to all of our social media sites. You can also find us on Facebook at It Tastes Different. We're also on Instagram at It Tastes Different PC. And then last but not least is Twitter, where you can find us at It Tastes Diff.
Today we add some new sprinkles to the day-old donuts with remakes and remasters. Today we're going to discuss remakes, remasters. Are they worth it? What's the difference? And to start off, we're going to throw it over to Nick.
Yeah, so in my idea of a remake and a remaster, a remake is a full-on remake of the game. Much like the Final Fantasy VII remake that came out, but anything like that where it completely remakes the game from the ground up. Final Fantasy VII remake was recreated from the ground up. It's all new visuals. They added new features and new storylines and some new environments that you didn't go to in the original game. So that would be, for me, considered a remake. Now, remastered is, well, Kingdoms of Amalur. We talked about that one in a previous podcast. And that one would be a remaster where they take the game, all the bells and whistles that came with it, give it a nice shiny coat, and put it back out there. So for me, that's what I feel like the difference is between the two. Now, I do think at the beginning, the naming of remake and remasters is getting a little bit more in line to what they are. I think when they initially were coming out, when we started seeing this wave of remasters and remakes, that the naming kind of got a little mixed up and people didn't know what a remaster and a remake were, right? Because you would have some games that would say they're a remake and some games say they're a remaster, and who knows which one's which. So I think it's getting a little bit more defined now. But as far as me going with remakes and remasters, I like remakes more. I prefer remakes if they're going to bring something out again. I don't mind remasters as long as the remaster's done well enough. There are some games that have been remastered that have done a pretty good job of the remaster. But I think for those games, maybe they weren't really that bad off to begin with. So a shiny paint, coat of paint, fixes those. For example, Dark Souls. They came out with a new Dark Souls. I think it was remastered. And yeah, that one's a remaster. It's the exact same game. It's just more polished, right? It looks nicer, looks cleaner, some bug fixes and things like that. But it's pretty much essentially the same exact game we got before. So I would consider that a remaster, and I believe that's how they presented it. And yeah, sure enough, it was a remaster. That wasn't a remake of the game. Everything was, because I played through it again, and yeah, it's the same games we've gotten before. So in that case, I think that remaster was pretty good. That was fine, especially for those on PC, because the original Dark Souls on PC did not play very well on PC. It was hard to get going and hard to get working, and it looked like garbage on PC. So, I think that's one of the reasons they did that remaster, so that way those people on PC that really wanted to play Dark Souls could have a more compatible, up-to-date Dark Souls version that they could play on PC. Plus, to reintroduce, all those other people back into that franchise, especially that was around the time that Dark Souls 3 was coming out or already came out. And, at that time, there was a big Dark Souls hype train going on. Everyone was in love with the game. So it was a perfect time for them to re-release an older title of it.
You mean all those people who like self-hating and are masochists, right?
Yes, people like me. So... yeah, so, and then Final Fantasy with the remake. So, yeah, that's what I think of both of those. What do you think, Patrick?
If we stick to exactly the terms that you just said, I am in agreement. I don't like remasters. Don't like it. I don't, in my opinion, they remaster stuff that's 5 years old. Why? Why do you remaster something that's 5 years old instead of spending your time making something new? I am one of these guys that I will argue tooth and nail that I'm so tired of hearing remakes and remasters. I want something new. I'm not a big person who goes back and plays a lot of the older stuff. I don't play a lot of my I don't play a lot of. I don't go back and play a lot of retro games. I do play some, but I have to be in the mood for it. For the most part, I want to play something. I want to have a new experience. I don't want to experience something I've already experienced. So, a remake, in my opinion, is like a new experience. So I don't mind that. Like, I will forever compare all new remakes to Final Fantasy VII. I did not play Final Fantasy VII the original, but I have seen it, watched videos on it, and then the differences and the combat change, all the stuff that's been changed. I'm like, this is a different game. I can get behind that. But when you pull something out and remaster it, you know, uh, Tony Hawk, those type of games. When you do that, what's the point? The game is not that old to need a remaster. So I don't get it. I can imagine, I can understand pulling something back from Super Nintendo days and remastering it. So, Nintendo, Sega days, remastering that type of stuff. Remastering something that came out 5 years ago, why? So I am not on board with that. There's so many terms that these game industries throw around that kind of confuse you. You have re-releases, rebalances, ports, remasters, rescripts, remakes, reimaginings. They'll come up with a new term just to sell you something, and that's what I feel it is a lot of time. Because in my opinion, a lot of remasters, Kingdoms of Amalur, we did a review on, is a perfect example of this. They took that game, which was already a great game, and threw some polish on it and didn't fix the underlying base issues with the original game. And they added some new content, which just ported over the original baseline issues in the original game. So I for one, usually am not a huge fan of remasters because I've already played most of the time. I've replayed the original. If I haven't played the original, I'm okay with it. But for the most part, I try to steer clear of a lot of remasters because they're not old enough to do anything with it. And if you're gonna pour time and development into it, you should remake it like Final Fantasy VII or the Resident Evil games because those were Resident Evil 2 and the 3 remakes. They were really good remakes. They were not. You could take and play side by side with the original game, and there's so much differences between them that it's technically its own new game, but it still tells the same story. It just does it in a different way. So for that, I can get behind a remake, but a remaster or a polish or whatever they want to call it, or a re-release is not worth the time for me. I usually stay away from them just because they're not worth my time to go back because they've not done enough. But because usually when I've left off a game that I played before that they remaster, they don't fix a lot of the underlying bugs. So Russ, what do you think? What are your opinions on the remake versus remaster type scenario?
I think it's almost like a tier system when you look at it. You have remake, remaster, make worse. I mean, it's just a tier system. With your Resident Evil 1, 2, was it 2 and 3? Those guys are 20-year-old games. So a remaster because that's more of a remaster because it's the same base game pretty much. But
no, they were remakes. 2 and 3 were remakes, weren't they? They weren't nowhere near. They were complete remakes. Yeah, they weren't remasters at all.
But what I'm saying was the story was similar, right?
Yes, the story was the same track, but there was a lot of new dialogue, a lot of additional.
Because in 1998 they didn't have the ability to do the voice tracks the way they do now. So they added. So yeah, I guess you could say a remake would be in order, but the polish of it, or I should say the essence of it, was the same feel, just like you were playing Resident Evil 3 in 2020 versus 1998 or 1999. I think that's one level. Like that's the level that we can get on board with. The same thing with like Black Mesa for Half-Life that came out this year. Those kind of like remakes and those remasters are great. Kingdoms of Amalur, that was more like you said, like you took some Neverdull and polished up some shine on your bumper. Those things there are really frustrating. Shadow Warrior is another fun one that got remade. That one was worth, I think, the being remade. And I'm trying to think of one more. The Final Fantasy VII. I've seen that one again. That's I am not big into Final Fantasy the way that Nick and Shane are. But at the same time, I mean, you could see, I mean, any blind person can see the amount of work they put into that. But again, we dive into that money hungry portion of it because I think it's episodic. You have to buy per this, and that's really frustrating for a player who wants to enjoy the game all at once. So really, I would like to see newer games, but if you're going to remaster, follow some of the guys that have done it right through Final Fantasy, through Resident Evil, through Black Mesa, which Black Mesa is a little bit even more of an update from Half-Life. I had that game in my wish list. I haven't bought it just yet. Another game I think about is like Shadow of Colossus. That game was 6 years old. Admittingly, it went from PlayStation 2 to 3, and then they kind of ported it to the new one. And I mean, it's a nice looking game, but they didn't do much to it. It was really lackluster. It was actually more frustrating. The Kingdom Hearts games, those games there are money grabs. I mean, those games were like 4 or 5 years old, and they're just kind of seeking out those people that want to buy anything that has Disney on them. Oh, I want to see it. It's new. Okay, yeah, it was 5 years ago. I remember playing that game. So there's a place for them, but I think because we see movies being remade that now it's time to make remake games. So that's where I stand on that. Shane, how about you?
I have a twisted, love for both. Final Fantasy VIII, they came out with a remaster, similar to they did with 7. Anybody that listens to this knows I love Final Fantasy VIII. The Final Fantasy VIII remaster was polish, updated character models, and very minor update, don't get me wrong, but you can actually see that they have eyes and not just pixel faces. They added some abilities to speed up the game, no enemy encounters, max HP, blah blah blah. But they didn't add anything to the story. They didn't add any additional or cut out stuff. That to me is not a remake. That's DLC. I mean, essentially, that's just DLC. Final Fantasy VII remake. That is a remake. That is, even though I have issues with that game, that is a true remake. That is taking something that was existing, ground up, new gameplay, new combat system, new character information. I mean, just the depth of information they gave you on Biggs and Wedge alone is really cool. Resident Evil 2 and 3. Those to me are right on the cusp of a remake and a remaster. Resident Evil 2 is right on the edge of a remake because they've added and completely rebuilt the game, but there's a lot of the original game in it still. But there's also a lot of new dialogue, new areas, new weapons, things like that. So, but Resident Evil, like you were saying, Russ, Resident Evils, the Final Fantasy VII, those are remakes. Those are worth that money. Now, if they came out with a Final Fantasy VIII remaster 2, I'll end up buying it, even if it's the most minimal crap. I'll end up rebuying it, going, "Oh my god, greatest game ever!" And that sucks. But I want to see the remakes, the remasters stop and make them more like the Resident Evils and the Final Fantasies, because it's really not worth it to throw HD graphics or HD quality to a game that's 20 years old and it still just looks like a 20-year-old game that's just shinier. It's bull crap. It's a money grab, that is all. You give a game like Kingdoms of Amalur, the game was not worth the money. It wasn't, even though it was great in its day, and it's not now. Plain simple. It's old, it's antiquated. It did not hold up. and they need to reevaluate where they're going to actually do these things. Like you were saying with the Dark Souls stuff, Nick. I mean, everything is Dark Souls like. So I can kind of understand why they did the Metro thing. The remaster for Dark Souls, but I think if the game is within 5 years, no, don't touch it. Leave it the hell alone. Spider-Man is going to PS5. They've updated the graphics on it and made Peter Parker a new face model. No, they should have just left it alone. I mean, put it over there if they want, and that's fine, but don't make me spend more money on it. I think that's a bunch of bull crap, and that's a money grab. So that's how I feel about the remake and remaster. I think there's a line between the two that's very thin. I don't think anything within 5 years should be touched at all, unless it's just updates to fix crap. But don't make me pay more money for something I just bought last year.
Right. I agree. I think we need to set time limits on this, almost like we need to set term limits. We need to set time limits on when you can remaster or remake a game. And I think the video game companies, they don't care what term they use. They don't care whether they use a remaster or a remake, because the Kingdoms of Amular is a perfect example. They called that a remake. That ain't no dang remake. Sorry, guys. And plus, that game came out in 2012. It's an 8-year-old game, and you're gonna remake it. You didn't remake Jack. You ran it through a polisher and added some new content. It's not a remake, and that's my problem. Is that, as we have just discussed, there is a clear definition of a remake versus a remaster versus a reimagining and all this stuff, and a reboot and all this stuff. But game companies don't care. They're gonna call it whatever they want to get the biggest bang for their buck. Kingdoms of Amular. I'm looking at you to make a remake. And so that's not a remake. What that game's not. It's a remaster at best. But we need to set time limits. I'm thinking you need to be a 10-year-old plus game before you can remaster it, because I'm tired of seeing these 5-year-old games being remastered. And I don't want to touch on something that Russ said, because Shadows of the Colossus was a remake. That game came out in like 2006, and then they did a remake. They did a remake of it in 2018, and it's a completely different game. It looks different. It has tighter gameplay control on it. I mean, I played the original back on PlayStation 2, I think it was.
Yep.
Where it came out, and then the new one that came out a couple of years ago. There's a big difference in those two games, and I will say that I played both of them, and I bought both of them, and it was a good game. But that's the problem, is that there's a lot of confusion between remake versus remaster and re-release. So, and game companies contribute to that. So I don't like it. I want to play a new experience, and I played Final Fantasy, or not Final Fantasy, but Resident Evil 2 back in the day, and I played the new one, and they're different games. They have the same storyline, but they're different games. When you play them, they don't play the same. They are different games. So, and that's what I would consider a remake, and I am fine with a remake in that sense. I know I know the story. I play it. Okay, I get a new vision of that story, because to me, a remake almost feels like a reboot to some extent, because they're not changing the story, but they're just redoing the visuals. Because if you ever look at like a reboot in movies, that's all they ever do. They're like, hey, we shot this movie back in 2010, and now we have 2020 technology, or even 2000. We have 2020 technology. Let's reshoot Spider-Man, because we have these better visuals than what we could do back in 2000 or 2005. And I'm fine with that. But you remake it, you need to remake it, not slap a coat of paint on it and call it a remake, when really what you just did was remaster it. Or these games coming out that are definitive editions that are just irritating the crap out of me, because all they did was throw a coat of paint on it and then say, hey, we went through it with a fine-tooth comb, when really you didn't. You basically brought that game's original gameplay into today's current game sphere, which, if you were to do a comparative thing, where 5 and 10 years is a lot of time in the video game market. I mean, in 10 years, we've gone through 2 consoles.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's a good chunk of time, but you can't take a game that had gameplay mechanics from 2010 and just port them over to 2020 and say we're all good, because we're all going to complain to no end. I sure do. I'm like, I get so tired of these remakes or these remasters that they call remakes, where you have cover mechanics that work like garbage, and they bring them over and remaster them, and you try to use them today, and you're just like, I hate this. You're comparing this to, cover mechanics that are today's standards. When you play like Gears or something, you're like, this cover mechanic works. But when you have this cover mechanic and of a game that they ported from 2000 2010, it just doesn't work in today's standards. So I have a big problem with this usually, and I try to steer clear of anything that I don't perceive as a real remake. And I get sucked in and screwed a bunch of times. Like, I felt I got screwed on Kingdoms of Amalur because that was not a remake, that was a remaster. And I feel I got screwed on the Mafia series because Mafia is not a remake, it's a remaster. So it happens. I get excited for something and I try it. So I have a lot of love hate. I have a lot of love hate with remakes and versus remasters, and it's because of confusion created by the gaming industry on the terms.
Yep. Yeah, and like I was going to say, it's kind of hard to blame the developers because we buy them. I bought Final Fantasy VIII. I knew it was minimal at best, but I bought it. So why would they not do it again? I mean, if I bought it, I'm sure a bunch of other people did, blah, blah, blah. So it does fall down to that. So people like me need to stop buying garbage when they say it's, oh, look at all we did. No, you didn't do squat, but, bring it to this console. Pretty much it. If I was a developer, I'd be like, heck yeah, free money. So I would have done it. I would have brought it over too. It all falls down to the consumer, really. If the consumer is getting tired of it like you are, you need to tell the consumer like me, you sure you really want to buy that again? You have it on everything, and all they did was put it to the next console.
I mean, there are great ones out there. I mean, we've touched on them. The Final Fantasy remake, the Resident Evil remakes. I mean, there's others out there. And Russ even talked about Black Mesa. That was a remake by a third party that is amazing when you look at it. I mean, that they basically came out with this, the group, the Crowbar Collective group that came out with that game, basically put it out kind of as a free, they started putting out their efforts, and in 2012 they kind of released this like free mod for the game, and to the point to where it transitioned into a commercial release. So in 2012 they put out this mod for Half-Life, the Half-Life Mesa mod, and then basically it is now its own game. So basically it took them better part of 8 years to, they started in 2005, but in 2012 they put out the mod, and then in the course of 8 years they put out a full-fledged game, which is the remake of Half-Life. And it looks amazing. And yes, it's on my to-play list as well, and I saw that, and I wanted to play it. But that's what I'm talking about with Remake. And this was a third-party company that did it. And they basically, once they released the mod, Valve was like, oh my God, this is great. We're going to greenlight you guys to go commercial with this and let them make money off of it. So, I'm all for proper remakes, but remasters, I can honestly leave them. If I see somebody touting a remaster, I'm usually leaving it alone unless it's like, if somebody came out and said, hey, we're doing a Star Fox remaster, I'd probably look at it with a second glance and say, you want to play this? Or, something like that. If we said, hey, here's Mario 64 remastered on the Switch or even every console, I would probably take a second look.
The one thing that, I look at as far as the developers' perspective, that was bringing those games to new people that never played them before. Like you said, you never played Final Fantasy VII, the original. And what did you do? You jumped in on this new one. You love the new one. But people that didn't play Final Fantasy VIII before, or even the remaster for 7, that gives them an opportunity to jump in and check it out, see what all the hype was about,
Right, but there's a time limit on that stuff. I mean, Final Fantasy VII was originally in 1997. We're not talking about remastering or remaking something that was 5 years ago.
No, absolutely.
It's 10-year difference in technology, and I will say I thoroughly enjoyed the Final Fantasy, the new one, the remake. I never played the original, but looking at it, I'm like, hey, it's a little long in the tooth for me to want to play now. But the remaster, yes.
Yeah, but that's why they did the things that they did with the remaster, as far as the 999 hit power, the speed up time, the no random encounters. They did that to give people an idea of the story and what made everybody love it so much, which is cool. I think it takes away from it a bit, but I mean it's cool to get people like you played through 7, play up to that part on the original, compare those differences. I mean it's pretty dang cool. I mean you can play 7 now. I think it was on Game Pass, but I know you can pick it up for like $10.
Right. So I mean, we talk about remakes and remasters. Nick, do you have a favorite remake?
As far as remakes go,
Remakes, yeah, we're not talking remasters. I'm going to take it basically and take the term remaster and wad it into a ball and throw it in the trash can because it's a stupid term and they need to get rid of it. Because basically it's an update to the game is what it is, but they charge everybody for it. Because I mean, think about WoW. If WoW, which has been running for what, since 2004? I think 2004. If every time they came out with a graphics overhaul, they said, hey, you got to pay $60 for the game because we got WoW remastered now. They usually do it with an expansion, but they've done a lot of times mid-game enhancements to the visuals of the game. So I don't like that they use that. So we're talking specifically remake. What do you have like a favorite remake that's happened?
as far as for me personally, probably my favorite remake has got to be the Final Fantasy VII remake. I think they did the best job for a remake, and it's probably one of my favorite as far as remakes go. That's currently out. I would say that, kind of going back 1 second, the Black Mesa is also on my wish list.
I was going to say, I'm in agreement with you on the Final Fantasy one. That's currently my favorite, but this one looks, the Black Mesa almost, if it plays as good as it looks in some of the videos, it may unseat it for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's Half-Life and redone, and it looks fantastic, and I really want to play Black Mesa. So, like you guys said, it's also on my wish list as far as wanting to purchase it at some point and play through it. One thing I'd like to see when we're talking about remasters, what I would like to see more companies do is kind of what Konami and Capcom did. Now I'm not talking about Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes that they did, but I'm talking about the collections. Because Capcom came out with the Mega Man collections, which was like what the first and second one were the Mega Man 1 through 6, and then I think after that it was 7, 8, 9, and 10. And they were just the original games. They also added new things like boss rush modes and challenge modes and stuff like that, and you could play, and I think in the Mega Man X collection and the X2 collection, you could play, they added like kind of an easy mode so people could, because those games are typically kind of difficult. So for those people that have a hard time with Mega Man, they could get through the game a little bit easier and experience the whole game. And then Konami came out with the Castlevania collection and the arcade collection and the Contra collection, and those again were that same thing. Those are really cool collections that were just the original game. Nothing was really changed, but you got to experience those. They were just brought to newer hardware so they could be played on newer hardware, and it was a bundled game, right? The Contra collection is a whole bunch of Contra games. The Castlevania collection is a whole bunch of Castlevania games. So I would like to see companies do something like that more, especially if they're going to bring out a game. Like maybe if there's a Mass Effect one, come out with a Mass Effect trilogy collection, right? Where it's just I would love to see them possibly remake the game, maybe, do kind of a remake on Mass Effect. But if they're going to bring out the original games, just kind of upscale them a bit, come out with a collection that has all three of them on there, right?
See, but in my opinion, that's just perpetuating this problem. I don't care about companies putting out a collection. That's no big deal at all. If you want all the Mega Mans in this series, that's fine. They'll sell it to you. The problem I have is when they start touting this stuff, because you can buy the Mass Effect trilogy. You can buy that as a set. You can buy these Mega Man games. You can buy these Resident Evil, these collections and stuff like that. No problem with that. The problem is that they basically put this collection out for like top dollar because they remastered. I don't even want to call it a remaster. They added new crap to one of the existing games in that series, and you could buy any one of those games back before they did this remaster to some section or added something to one of the games in the collection. You could have bought the whole collection for $30 or $20, and now the collection's up to $60 again because they added the stuff like you said. They added these new challenge modes and crap. I'm like, I don't care about that. I care about the game itself, not that you decided that Mega Man needed this new mode. I mean, whatever. to me, that stuff is just perpetuating the money grab portion of it because you could get the collection for $20 to $30, and now you're back up to a $60 collection.
Well, I think Mega Man and Konami did it well in their sense because those games, those collections were still, I think they were only $20 when they came out. Yeah, they're $20. Like the Mega Man Legacy collection, the original one's only 15, and then the X collection is $20. So, and then the Konami collections that came out, those were $20 each. So that's not bad. Yeah, I mean, if they came out with those games at $60 just because they added a couple new features, then that would be something. But but they also got to do it right because Konami also came out with a while back the Silent Hill collection that had 2 and 3 on it, which was horrible ports of those games.
Oh,
so
yeah, they were bad.
They made them worse somehow. I don't know why. Right. I don't know how,
but then that's a port. But yeah, you got to tackle that too. It's a port, which I steer clear of ports like they're the plague because I very rarely see a port done right. So usually when I hear something being ported to another console, I steer clear of it. Or ported from PC to console or vice versa. Console to PC is not as bad because I can plug a controller into my PC. But going from a PC to a controller, those ports are usually real horrible. Like they bury menus within like 5 button clicks deep to get to a menu that you used to be able to click one button on a PC. I mean, you got a whole keyboard to use on a PC, and then you got 8 buttons on a controller plus some joysticks and those buttons. So I mean, I usually avoid those like the plague. I get so tired. I'm not a big nostalgia person, or retro person like Nick is. I don't go back to play stuff a lot. To be honest, my Steam library is pretty big. My Xbox console library is getting bigger, but I don't replay a whole lot of anything, to be honest. I stick with what's new because there's just so much new out there. I don't have time to go back to this older stuff. So the Konami collections and like Mega Man collections and all that stuff, I liked those games back when I played them, but I don't have any will or want to go back and play them again.
You know what's a very interesting thought, and it really gets me thinking. So sports games, Madden has been around since 1992 or something like that. They've gone from Madden 93, Madden 94, Madden 95 to whatever, EA 25, whatever you want to call it, right? So every year they're bringing out a new game that updates the same basic principle of a football, basketball, hockey game, right? They do that every year. Nobody's going to buy a Madden 94 remaster. Well, for good reasons. And that's why there is none. So why aren't we using those same principles within these older games? These older games are great and fantastic. Playing them retroly is wonderful sometimes. Sometimes it's a great time. But instead of Final Fantasy VII, why don't you do Final Fantasy 7.1 or something? Add something to the storyline. If you love those characters, if people love those characters, use those characters within more of a storyline. Make a new game with it versus just rehashing a game that we've already played. I mean, that's just something that I've been thinking about as we've all been talking here, is that instead of playing Resident Evil 3, and again, maybe that's not the greatest example. Maybe the Kingdom of Amalur game is a perfect example. What if you instead of remastering that the way it was, just adding on a completely different game, updating graphics, something of that nature, and call it, Kingdoms of Amalur 2020 or whatever you want to call it.
Well, I see what you're saying. And Final Fantasy VII Remake is almost exactly what you described as a 7.1. It's an entirely new game overall. I mean, it's still following a storyline trope of the original, but it's still so much new. And I would consider that exactly what you were saying, the 7.1. The reason they don't do a Madden 99 remaster is because they had Madden 99, they had Madden 2000, 2001, 2002, so on and so forth. There's 40 of those freaking games, or however long Madden's been around. I'm not a big Madden fan, but that's why they won't do it. I mean, they're putting one out every freaking year. It's just like NBA and the FIFAs and They have one for every year.
But I think you're missing my point in that. You're right. They have one every freaking year. It's the same basic game upgraded, whether it's
Barely.
new players,
Well,
whether it's new
but
players, but like, why aren't they using the game?
if you
Like,
flip that around, though, look at it the other way. They are doing that. They're putting out a remaster every year.
That's true. That's
I
true.
mean,
It's a good way to
technically,
look at
they
it.
are putting out a remaster every year. We're
and
remastering
those,
this game, and we're putting in the new sports team. We're changing the new jerseys to
yeah,
be the new ones. You know, they're doing a remaster every year. So if you want to look at it that way, they don't need to because they remaster every year.
and that's what I'm trying to say, that it's the same basic game. They're updating it as they go. So why why not do that with some of these other games? But at least, and I'm not as big as a sports fan game player as I used to be, but for those that are out there in the world that really love games, they do have things that they add to the game to make the game more interesting for those that focus in on those games. So if we're talking about Resident Evil, and of course we're up to like what, Resident Evil 10 coming out soon, or 27, what, something like that.
It would be 8.
Okay, so we are looking at that. They are at least expanding with that, but if they wanted to, what they could do is even do every year or something like that with these games. Even if you wanted to say upgrade graphics a little bit, but extend the storyline for us. If they're able to do it in football, and the game of football or the game of basketball has not changed. It's not changed in 20 years. It's the same. You're still trying to get a basket in a hoop. You're still trying to score a touchdown. But yet they've been able to add things to the game to make those people stay with those games. And I think that would be, these developers they would do better with these remasters if that's what they did within the game versus just throwing out a new remake.
I think that you would confuse your player base if you did something like that. Because could you imagine
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII and then you had a new Final Fantasy now? What would you call it? I'm not talking like the new Final Fantasy that we're getting, though. What is it, 16 or whatever that's coming
16.
out? Yeah, because that's a different story. This one and this Final Fantasy VII remake that came out is an episodic portion of the original one that tells the same story. It's just using current technology to make it, because it is basically from the ground up. It is. When you look at the two, there's no comparison between the two. So what would you do with that? Because you wouldn't call this one Final Fantasy 16 because it's Cloud Strife story, the Final Fantasy 7 story. So what?
What I'm saying is that not necessarily do you make 25 of those, Final Fantasy 7s. I'm just saying that within this, if they're going to do a remaster, if you're going to do a remake, then let's always add something new, something extra to it. And those games that you're talking about, Final Fantasy 7, Resident Evil 2 and 3, they have added something to it. It's like the release of the movie, like the 17th release of Star Wars, and they added 12.2 more seconds in this movie. Well, by God, we're going to watch that new one because it's got 12 seconds we haven't seen before. I think that's what I mean more versus like, the legacy games or the games that continue on like that. I think that as the heart of who we are as gamers is what we're striving for when we compare a remaster to a remake. I guess that's where I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I understand. And a perfect example of this, Final Fantasy did this, and in my opinion, it was confusing as all heck, especially to me, a non-Final Fantasy person. And Shane and Nick already probably know what I'm going to talk about. Final Fantasy X and X-2. That was the most confusing thing, because me not being in the franchise was like, is X-2 a remake? Is a sequel? What is it? And to me, I had to go look at it. I'm like, because I saw it on the Game Pass, not Game Pass, but on a game listing group, and I'm like, is this, because I saw Final Fantasy X remastered, and I'm like, okay, so what is X-2? And it just caused all kinds of confusion that I had to go do and dig into research for. If it would just follow the sequence of like, this is Final Fantasy 11, it would have been all right, but that's not what they did. They went, here's Final Fantasy X, here's Final Fantasy X-2. It creates a little bit of confusion, but maybe if they did do it as like, because Final Fantasy is big on using the Roman numerals for their numbering scheme, so they don't actually call it Final Fantasy X, it's Final Fantasy X, which is the Roman numeral for 10. So they did 10-2. And I'm like, okay, because if we would have been what you're talking about, it would have been Final Fantasy 10.2. So, like,
Yes.
the
Now,
series 10.2, episode .2 of it,
yeah, that threw a lot of people off because Final Fantasy never did sequels up that I know of up till they did 10-2. I'm like, 10-2? No, 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 no. You mean 11? It's like, no, it's 10-2. It's same characters. No, it
Right.
ain't.
Yeah, exactly. And
No,
that's the
you
thing
don't
is,
do that.
right. And to what Russ is saying, that might have worked. I mean, because then we would have Final Fantasy. This would be Final Fantasy 7.2 because it's not. Well, I don't even know that you could do that because technically it's not a sequel.
Yep.
It's the same story, just retold with current technology. Because
Yep.
I can't stress this enough. 7 is completely remade from the original 7, and it's to Shane brings up all the time. It's episodic. We've gotten the first. I don't even know what portion of the story it is because I didn't play the original, Shane. So the first game is really the first game, in my opinion, is pretty lengthy. And what would you say percentage wise is of the original Final Fantasy 7?
Oh God. Well, it depends on how
Would you
you
say
look
it's
at it.
25% of it, or would you say it's 33, or are you
I,
halfway through the story?
I would say you're
Mm.
probably 70% through disc 1.
yeah,
And how many
because you're
discs were
not
there?
4
3.
discs.
I
There's
think
How
4.
many?
I'm
I think
pretty
it was
sure.
3 for 7. But
So would you say that would, if you're 70% of the way through it, then that would put you 25% of the way through the game if it's 3 discs?
yeah,
So you're 25%, and in my opinion, that's a pretty lengthy amount of the game. And if you got the original Final Fantasy that was 3 discs long, would you say that it's the same amount of game? So let's say I'm just taking this Final Fantasy because it's my only experience with some of this stuff. The 25% that you put into the current remake, was it the same length of time that you put into the original Final Fantasy 7, or would you say it's extended?
God.
probably about the same.
Yeah,
Wow.
I would think
So
that.
so that is one heck of a deal, in my opinion. Final Fantasy VII, the original game, if it was as long as this, if 25% of that game was as long as this one is, I thought it was a pretty lengthy game.
Yeah,
Final
but the
Fantasy
problem
7 was a
is
long game.
Final
so was
Fantasy
8.
7 was probably the first game I put 100 plus hours in. I
Okay,
mean, not even a
I
joke.
mean,
It was easy.
I have the original one. It's 3 discs long.
Yeah,
8
I
is
just
4.
looked too. I got it. Yeah,
so that's what I'm saying. So
it's better.
how could you reconcile that without something like a remaster or a remake title? I mean, I understand the need for that because you can't call this one Final Fantasy 7.2 because you know it's
No,
technically not a
I would agree.
sequel. It's not a sequel. You're not adding anything to the story. I mean, you're adding dialogue and stuff like that, but we still know
You're
the
adding a
story.
lot. There's a lot being added to the overall story of 7. I mean,
You get more details of it, right? We still know the
it,
story of 7, but you're getting more
yes,
details of the story. It's the same story, but Final Fantasy 7 was the Cliff Notes version, and then Final Fantasy 7 Remake is the extended version of the
yeah,
story with
Right.
like director's comments and all that kind of
Yeah.
crap
Final
in it.
Fantasy 7, the original, is like watching the movie. This is reading the book. Right. Right. That has
yeah.
all the details. Because
Right.
in Remake, you get to learn a lot more about Jesse, Wedge, and
Biggs.
Biggs,
Right.
which in the original 7, they weren't as involved as they are in this one. I mean, they were there, but you really didn't have a ton of interaction between them and you as the story progressed, especially with like Jesse. They really expanded Jesse's role in the remake. And you go to some different areas in 7, but I mean, the essential key points that happen in the remake are exactly what happened in the original. So, yeah, I
And
mean, it pretty much followed it to a T.
I can tell you what, I feel like, because of where I came into the Final Fantasy series, like when I first played Final Fantasy, it was Final Fantasy 14. I didn't play anything before Final Fantasy. I heard of it, I didn't think it was something I would like because, I'm like, okay, whatever, and then, I hated 14. It kind of gave me a really, really bad taste. I mean, I hated it. And then A Realm Reborn came out, and I was like, this is really good. And then at the behest of Shane and Nick, I played 15. I loved 15. 15 was a good game in my opinion. I'm like, okay, this is a really good game. And then you guys were just hyping the crap out of Final Fantasy VII Remake because I wasn't even giving it a second glance. I wasn't. I was like, whatever. And then I borrowed I borrowed it, and I'm like, holy crap, this is an amazing game. And I feel bad now because I just can't go back and play like 10, 10-2. Even the remastered, they just don't look as good. And I'm a graphics snob. I'll be the first to admit that I can't look at something that's 10 plus years old and be like, I'm gonna get enjoyment out of this, even if the story's great. I just can't get back to polygon. I can't get to the polygonic weird look, so all that stuff. But I am super hyped about 16. I really want to play it, and so if they did a remake of any of the older Final Fantasies, I would probably be on board with trying them out. A remake, not a remaster. Because I looked at was it 8 that did a remaster? And I'm like, it's still all polygonic. And I'm out.
It was very hard to push myself back into it at the beginning because, like, ugh. I mean, this looks much better, but comparatively, this looks like crap to what 15 is.
Right.
So it was hard, but I also once I started getting back into it, I was like, yeah, I remember that. I love this. Oh yeah, I can do that. See, but I went past the graphics because I feel the game is that good.
And see, I have a hard time with that, but I do think they tell a great story. I mean, I will admit that Final Fantasy VII, whatever part of the story I got, was pretty freaking awesome, and I wanted to know more, and I wanted to play more. And the same thing with 15, because 15 was very kind of modern-esque, big cities, driving automobiles and stuff like that. And then, and this the history of like the Final Fantasy universe is pretty interesting to me. I definitely find it very interesting, and I want to know more, I want to play more, but I just can't bring myself to play super old stuff. Is because I'm a huge graphics snob, and I will admit it. I am a little snobby when it comes to that stuff. I just can't. My eyes need the caviar of the gaming world. I just can't bring myself to do it, and so I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I'm just too hung up on graphics for me to be able to go back to some of that older stuff. I have a hard time with these. There are some great indie titles out there that are 16-bit and 32-bit. So I just find they're great games, but I don't put a whole lot of time into them because I'm just like, I'm tired of looking at this.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. Look, I'm going to go back to something that you said earlier, though, talking about was it Black Mesa, I believe, that the indie random person was remaking and remastering. I see a lot of that online. People taking like Metal Gear Solid, just these guys who love the game and just rebuilding it on their own. I would love to see the developers, embrace that more. Let Bob and his buddies take Metal Gear Solid and just, upgrade it and master it and make it all new like they do with a lot of these games. But, they get shut down by the developers, which to me, it's like, man, they're doing work for free. What the hell's your problem? Give them 10% of the cut, release it. I would love to see the developers let people that are passionate about the product that they made and do those things, but they just won't.
Yeah. I mean, because there's so many remakes out there. Like, there's one that just came out that I completely forgot about. It was the Destroy All Humans. That was a remake that they just came out with of the original game, and I'm like, who asked for a remake of that? I like the original Destroy All Humans, the Aliens game, but I never thought, we can remake this.
It is fantastic.
I mean, it's definitely on my playlist, but it's one of those ones where I'm like, I already played it. I need a $20. It needs to be $20. But going back to some of that stuff, so I stepped out of the PlayStation world for quite a while until this last PlayStation. And what got me back into that was just a few games. I'll be honest, what got me back into there was Horizon Zero Dawn. Is the only reason I bought it. And when I bought it, it came with The Last of Us remastered. So as a person who didn't play the original Last of Us before the remaster, I think Shane, you and Nick did. Was there a big overhaul between The Last of Us and then the remastered version?
Graphics, you could see a difference, but not like, oh my God, it's so different. It's amazing. But you could say, oh yeah, that's pretty clean now. It's smooth, runs well. But when it comes to that game though, the original, I have no complaints about the PS3 version, let alone the PS4
Yeah, there
version.
wasn't much to fix with that game. So
Yeah, it
Right,
really
so
wasn't.
that's what I kind of wondered. What was the point of the remaster? And the only reason I think they came out with a remaster was to sell
just
more
to put it
PlayStation
out on
4s.
Yep.
PlayStation 4. Yep.
Right, yeah, that happens a lot. And I will be honest with you, it was I played the remastered version because it came with the PlayStation 4 that I bought. As you can see, that's how long it took me to buy a PlayStation 4. I got Last of Us remastered, and I bought my PlayStation 4 for Horizon Zero Dawn. So I'm like, okay, I didn't play the original, so I'm like, this one to me looks like a great game. When I got it, I'm like, what did they have to fix for The Last of Us? I mean, when did the Last of Us original game came out on PS3, as everybody said, but how much lag time was there really between? Because Last of Us is what 20? When did Last of Us 2 come? Last of Us came out in 2013, I think, right?
Yeah, right about there.
And that was about the time. I'm trying to remember when the remaster came out, but it was, like I said, it was a push to get more people on the PlayStation 4. But like I said,
Remaster came out a year later.
a year
Yep.
later.
Mhm.
Why? So why? And the only reason
Just
I
to
can think
push
of,
PS4. Plus,
yeah,
Yeah.
plus again, Last of Us was towards the end of the PS3.
so old
And
technology.
PlayStation 4 was already announced and it was coming out, and it was like not the last game, but like one of the last games one of the big last games to come
Big
out on
first party one,
PlayStation,
yeah.
right? On the PlayStation 3. So I think that's one of the reasons also why they moved it over to the PlayStation 4. One, to sell more copies of the PlayStation 4 because it is the first one is a beloved game, and so they just put they just cleaned up the pixels and threw it over there, called it a remaster.
So yeah, that's what I'm
But
saying. A year later
was
is
worth
kind of
it.
was it really worth it? Would you have bought the game twice?
I did buy it twice.
Hmm.
My
I would not
PlayStation
have bought.
came with it.
I bought a
Yeah.
PlayStation 4 that came with a remastered
mine
copy
too.
of it.
No, I bought it again because that to me, that game was just almost perfect. I mean,
And the
that's
day
how.
that game came out, I borrowed your PlayStation 3 and the game just to
Yes,
play.
you did. That's right. I forgot about that.
So what I've learned from this conversation is Shane is the reason we're in the position we are with game studios right now. Shane buys everything. Shane is. Did you guys ever watch the old Sipple and Ollie cartoons or sock puppet show back in the day? He reminds me of the guy that buys the crap, the little puppet that has the worthless crap that has the infomercial that says "Buy my crap." Shane sees Final Fantasy on anything. He's like, "I'm buying it."
I had
Look,
that crap on my watch.
It's Final Fantasy the diaper. Shane bought a pack of them.
That's right. I play it on my Alexa.
Shane is the reason that we have the market the way it is because there are fanboys of stuff. I mean, I will admit I love stuff, but I'm not going to buy it just for the buy it. I love the Mass Effect series. I am not buying a remaster of any of that garbage. I will buy a remake if I feel it's warranted, but I'm not buying a remaster of any of that because I've already played it. I don't need to see the polished version of it because there is no better polish than the memory that I have of the game. It's a proof of positive. I mean, how often have you guys played something that you didn't play for 10 years? Because I haven't played Star Fox since I was a kid, but it's a great game in my mind. And if I go back and play this game now, I can tell you right now, I'm going to be like, my eyes are bleeding looking at this trash.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about it. I mean, but there's those games that for certain people, there's those games that even though they know the controllers are so outdated and antiquated, the graphics, the even just the story itself is just old school. That it still holds up to certain people. That's why I have Final Fantasy VIII on everything. I have Final Fantasy VII on everything too. But there's those games that no matter what hold up to certain people.
I was playing Mega Man X this morning.
And yeah, Nick is like.
But Nick's a
Nick,
retro guy, though. We understand that with him.
No, Nick is just a game hoe. He will play any and everything under any banner, genre, console, computer. He will play anything. He is not one of those people that go, "Oh, that's not my thing." He's like, "Hell, I'll try it. Looks interesting."
Yeah, that's how I pick up. Yeah, I agree. Nick is a game whore.
Yeah.
He just plays everything, and that's.
Oh, yeah.
that's the unique one of us on that because Nick is always playing retro stuff, and me, I'm just like, eesh. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. Who remembers playing Ninja Turtles on the PC or not
Who
PC, but
remembers playing it?
Nintendo on the Nintendo?
Oh man, who remembers living on it?
I mean, but I guarantee you, and I don't want to go back and play it. I remember spending so much time on my 13-inch or 14-inch TV in my bedroom playing the crap out of that game and just going, "This is great. The underwater levels is all fun." And now I bet if I go back and play it now and be like, "I hate this. I can't stand to keep playing this," because I don't want to ruin my nostalgia. Because in my mind, that game looks a lot better than if I were to load it up and play it today.
I would absolutely play it. The Ninja Turtle arcade that came out for One Up. And if my wife's listening, I love you, and I know what I want for Christmas again.
That's another one. I have had a chance to play that in the last 3 years, and I'm pissed off that I played it because that game, I probably blew $20 of my grandma's money multiple times throughout a summer playing that game, going to the Walmart or wherever back in the day, and it would be in the little arcade section, where you go in the front doors, or you go to the arcade and it was there, and I would be like, and my grandma would give me $20, and I'd go in there and spend it all on Ninja Turtle game and play it. And I remember playing it. Where was this at? Where did they have it? Was it 1984 here in town? I can't remember where it was at, but I remember playing it going,
Aladdin's Castle.
Aladdin's Castle was the only place I could think of back
I'm talking about it recently.
Oh, recently? Yeah, they do have it in 1984.
Yeah. But in the back of the day, we played it in the movie theaters. They had arcades and stuff, but I played it not too long ago, and I think it was in 1984, and I was just like, I shouldn't have played this because I've ruined it. It's not what I remember, and it's the reason why I don't play some of that stuff, because I remember loving the Ninja Turtles game. I'm like, this game is so awesome. And now I play it, and it's like, it's the same thing. Jump right, kick, jump left, kick, jump right, kick, jump left, kick, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. I'm like, oh my God, this game sucks. Why did I do this to myself?
That's because you didn't have your Ninja Turtles squad. You can't. Right. Ninja Turtles was never about you playing Ninja Turtles.
It was about me playing it when I was a kid, because I played it was about myself.
Well, yeah, and you say I had no friends. But, for me, it was, you go into an arcade, and it's always freaking Donatello left open. You got 3 dudes. All right, man, your fourth is here. Click, drop the quarter. Ninja Turtles, to me, was always about the team. The 4 turtles, everybody playing together. That was, that's my turtle feeling.
So there's something. Why hasn't anybody remade the Ninja Turtles games?
They have.
They did back on the 360.
That's how old is that? Think about that. They need to be remade in today's standards. So I'm talking about remake.
They do. I don't.
Probably
was the 15? One on the 360? I don't even think it had. Did it have online co-op? I cannot remember. But they remade Turtles in Time. That's what they remade.
It did. It did.
I'm talking about remake the actual arcade game.
Right. Well, I mean,
they have with One Up.
It's not remade though. It's still an emulator.
It's slightly enhanced though. It's slightly. I say that very loosely.
I bet it's not. I mean, come on. Let's just, I guarantee if you look at the licensing, nothing has been done to that game. It's just like, here's the game. We just put it in a one-up cabinet. And don't get me started about one-up cabinets. That is the epitome. That's the epitome. Yeah, that's the epitome of we're going to sell you garbage.
I like mine.
It's $300 freaking particle board, but they put a stinking emulator in there. Come on. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, come on, man. Light up marquees. You got the, really solid control setups. I mean, the one I've got in here, I mean, Aztec, it's a blast.
You basically paid.
I paid $150, by the way, and it was worth it.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm like, there's nothing more than, and I'm not a small guy. I'm a big guy. There's nothing more than I want to squeeze 4 of my fat asses next to each other and trying to play Ninja Turtles together with all of you guys. Because ain't none of us super small. Russ and Shane are probably the scrawniest of the 4 of us. And there's no way that I want to scooch in elbow to shoulder with you guys and play this thing on my knees.
Oh, come on. I'm a skinny bitch. I'll be in the middle.
we need the full size cabinet so I could sit there and play in between everybody and throw elbows and not be like hitting you guys all the time, Because
you do have a point with that. We definitely all have to thin down a little bit to be able to snuggle up into that.
Yeah, that's all we need. We're just basically freaking hugging it up in a big group right there, where somebody's got one arm. You got one arm in there, and you got got your little finger in between somebody else so you can play. You know, you're just like, I
I'm
don't know
getting, I'm getting worried you're not talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles anymore.
because the only way to actually play that with 4 players is if everybody played sideways. So if you can't square up with the machine because 4 of you cannot square up with that machine and play. You're basically going to have to be sideways, like basically front to back playing that game.
I don't know. I mean,
2 people can play on there.
The cabinet that I have is a 2-player setup. Me and Nick, we sat there just fine.
2 players. That's 2 players. I'm talking 4
yes,
players.
But the 4-player cabinet for the Ninja Turtles has got a really wide.
It's also going to be $300, isn't it?
Yes, and I'll buy it. I love you, honey. If you're listening.
And I'm sure we'll all play it. I'm sure we will all play it, and then I'll be like, "This game's still. Why'd I ruin my childhood memory by playing it?" Because that's what happens to me a lot of times. I don't know if it happens to you guys, but it does to me. Where I have this vision of this game in my head, and then I go out and I play it, and I'm like, I just ruined my vision of this game.
Yeah, that does happen. That really does happen.
So I try not to do that stuff to me. So I don't. There's a reason why I haven't gone back and played the original Metroids and all that stuff because I love those games. But I guarantee you, if I go back today, I'm like, I'm done. I must have had a lot more patience as a kid as I have as an adult today too, because a lot of the games from my childhood are platformers and stuff like that. And you're just like, today I have no patience for that. So there we go. We got off on a tangent about platformers and nostalgia instead of talking about remasters. But so remasters and remakes, there are stuff that I want them to remake. They just don't remake. They remake.
All right, let's go through the group.
We've already done this. We've already
done the 3 games.
We did the nostalgia. During the nostalgia, we said, what would we like them to remake? Remember?
That's true. Shoot, I forgot.
But it's all the same still. I mean, I want stuff that's remake from my childhood, from 20 plus years ago. I'm sure you guys are the same way. I want something that's 15 years old. Yeah, remake Asteroids.
Space Invaders.
Space Invaders. Come on. Asteroids, Space Invaders, VR.
Yeah. I don't know about VR. Space Invaders would be kind of weird in VR.
Think about it. You're down in your little turret thing, and you look it up. You got the.
You just see nothing but alien butts going back and forth.
Well, what game was that? With they did a movie with that.
Pixels.
Pixels, yeah, where they played Space Invaders and all that stuff. That would be how it would be. We're playing Centipede.
I would love that.
Or VR Pac-Man.
My God. You can play. It's now co-op. You're friends of the ghosts.
That would be kind of cool. That would be kind of fun.
That would be funny.
Swiggity swoogity, we're coming for that booty. Oh my God, he ate the cherry. Yeah, I don't know, dude. Remasters are fine for me for older games, and when I'm talking about older, I'm talking 10 plus years. You shouldn't be not remastering. I don't want to use the term remaster because I don't want anything remastered. I don't want a single thing remastered ever. I want remakes or reboots.
Just a reimagining. I mean,
something but basically it's re-engineered from the ground up. It's not it's not a polishing. I want something. If I want remakes, I want something of 10 plus year old games. I don't want something that came out. I don't want something that came out on the Xbox 360 remastered for the Xbox One. That's too new. You're one generation away.
Yep.
I would say, okay, now that we're coming out with the PS5, let's get some PS2 remakes done. Let's get some of that stuff. Or
maybe an early PS.
Original PlayStation. There's a lot of great original PlayStation games.
I was thinking about it the other day. Siphon Filter. I would love to see that brought back. That was a great series.
Right. Parasite Eve or...
Yep. Parasite Eve. Dino Crisis.
But instead what we get is a lot of this God of War 3 remasters. I like Halo, but the Master Chief remaster stuff, come on. The Master Chief collection, they were
I like the Master Chief collection.
I have to agree with
I like the collection, but they jumped up the price because they have this as remastered.
Yeah, but what they did with 1 and 2 was a complete difference.
It was garbage. It was still same gameplay mechanics. It was still the same mechanics though. And when we played it, and when I played it, I'm like, this is garbage, guys. It's the
I don't know.
same stuff.
I mean, what was it, like 2 months ago or so? Me and you, Shane, beat one
Yeah.
and then or beat two and then three.
Yeah.
I think. Yep.
I don't know, man. I mean, to me, it's nothing. There was
Again?
no reason for me to go back to it.
I got your back,
It's-
Pat. It was a waste.
I bought
Oh.
it. It was a waste of my money.
No, I don't know. I really
And
enjoyed
that's
it.
the
I
problem.
think-
That's the problem though, is that there's guys like you guys who play that, and for guys like me who don't, and for me it was a waste of money.
I didn't buy it. I just got it with Game Pass, so that's where I bought. I never bought it when it came out. When it first came out with the Master Chief Collection, when it came to Game Pass, that's when I finally started playing it.
Yeah,
I
same
just,
here.
but see, that's the problem though. Yeah, I mean, so I just hate the remaster stuff because they're just like, okay, we got these remastered stuff, and I want something new. And a remake is new. Everything that's been remade that I played that is a true remake is new. I would argue with anybody that Resident Evil 2 remake is a different game. I mean, it's the same story, but it is in all intents and purposes a different game.
Oh, absolutely. There's no arguments
Yeah,
there.
I mean, there's a lot of new areas that you go to in Resident Evil 2, the remake, that are not in the original.
Well, and the gameplay mechanics are tightened up. I mean, it's
Right.
not like they
Yeah.
just took the
Because it was
same.
tank controls in the old one. You know, you
Right.
move like a tank, and this one you don't.
Exactly.
It's more modern.
Exactly, but all these other games and the Halo Master Chief Collection didn't tighten up controls. It was the same. I mean, now granted, the controls were still good. The controls were good when it came out. But I'm just saying, there's mechanics that are old mechanics that needed lined out if they wanted to basically make it more modern. So, I mean, because we played some of the collection together as a group, and I was
Yeah.
completely bored out of my skull. I'm like, I've done this.
Yeah,
There's
we played
nothing
through
new.
Reach.
Yeah, there's nothing new. It plays the same. The controls are still wonky to me, and it felt like I was playing it back when it came out. So
Well, with
I was
certain,
like-
for me, with certain games, that's kind of what I want, depending on the game. Final Fantasy VII Remake, for example, besides the story, playing through that game, I didn't feel like I was playing the old Final Fantasy VII, right?
Right.
I mean, visually and combat-wise and everything, it felt like a brand new game. Not to say I didn't love it. I did. Absolutely love it. Can't wait for part 2. I wish part 2 was out now so I could be playing it. But, so it felt like that way. I don't know. With Halo, it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type thing. I kind of like I like the Master Chief Collection, and I like feeling that, oh yeah, we played through this again. When me and Shane, and it might just be for certain people, right? Because when me and Shane played through 2 and 3, I had a blast playing through it. And I mean, we played as soon as we beat 2, we went right into 3, right? I think, and started playing through 3. So, and then we ended up beating 3, and then.
We got to go to 4 now, even it sucked.
Yeah, we were going to go to 4, and then we started playing Reach with you guys. But
Yep.
So I guess it just hits certain people different ways.
Well, I
Right.
think it all comes down to just what you said. Certain people, everybody's going to have that different feeling. That's why 4 flavors, 4 opinions. I mean, Pat and Russ, they fully agreed on the Halo thing with each other. We disagreed with them. So it's just like many things. It's a personal taste. It's a personal opinion. Ain't no reason to hate on it.
No, and we still played together, even though I was bored.
yeah.
I was like, well, I still want to, because I want to play with my friends. So I still played, even though I was like, this is boring, but we play together. And we a lot of times we end up screwing off in stuff more often than not. I mean,
It's the experiences we have together, right?
exactly. I mean, we can't play the Ghost, the wet Wildlands games. We played both of them. We cannot play those games without spending half the time screwing off.
Oh yeah,
You
look
know,
at me.
so-
I'm a helicopter.
You're like, why did everybody just jump out of the helicopter? Oh, you'll see. Just stupid stuff like that. Or I remember one night we got on and we played like one mission, and then we spent the next 2 or 3 hours like driving cars full of C4 into each other.
Lamborghinis up mountains.
Yeah, just stupid stuff like that. You're just like, okay, We end up screwing off half the night in some of these games, and that's what we end up doing. We never make it through the full game because we're screwing off.
Yeah,
which is what's fun about them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what makes it fun.
Yeah. So,
but far as the remakes and remasters go, get rid of the remaster. Absolutely. I think we could all agree with that. Give us true remakes. If you're going to say remake, damn it, make it a remake. Don't charge me for the same crap I got 2 years ago or 20 years ago.
Right.
That's just ridiculous.
And I will agree, and I'm all for making collections. I for one, unless I have not played anything in the collection, I don't buy collections. But if I haven't played what's in the collection, or if I'm missing half what's in the collection, I'll buy it. Collections are a good idea because you can get a lot of games for a cheaper price. But I don't agree with extending the price of the collection because you remastered or added new content to a 25-year-old game that's you add a new level or a new mode of gameplay. Because in all honesty, I'm going to play the game in the way it was originally intended to be played, and that's just who the gamer I am. I'm not going to be one of these guys who said, "Oh, I want to do new time trial modes." I'm like, I'm not in that. I'm not a that type of person. I'm usually a one and done type playthrough person for most games, unless it's like a game of services like Destiny and stuff like that. I'll play through multiple times and run through that type of stuff. But I don't like the remastered title stuff that the garbage that they've been doing because it feels like you said a money grab to me.
Yeah, I don't like the remasters either. Mainly because they're exactly what you said. They're more money grabs. They're usually not done right. They take a turd and they polish it and they put it out there, and that's pretty much what you're getting. If they're gonna bring games back out again, one of two ways. Either you make it a remake, where you just do like a Final Fantasy VII or a Resident Evil, where you just remake it from the ground up, or you do a collection. And I agree with you on the collections. Like, I love the Mega Man collections, but I don't play the time trials and the boss rush modes and challenge modes. I don't care about that. I just want to play the original game. So, if they want to come out with a collection, they don't have to add that stuff. And it's fine if they do, as long as they don't jack the price up, exactly like you said, Patrick, as long as they don't jack the price up because they added these different things. It's like, that's neat and all, but I don't really need that. I just want to play the original game. That's really, if you came out with a Mega Man collection that had all 6 games and that's all it had on it, it didn't have challenge modes or boss rush modes or a big, whatever fan art mode or whatever it is, and you just brought it out for $10, $15, $20 maybe, then cool. I'm down. I'm down to buy it. But if you're gonna jack up the price because you added these things, then it's like, well, then you're just trying to take my money, basically, at that point.
Right, exactly.
You're not doing anything to the games. You're just adding some little extra features and sticking a 20 more bucks on that price tag.
Right, because that people will buy it for the nostalgia effect, or the people who really want to buy all of them in that collection. Yeah, so it's to each their own. Like we said, everybody has their own opinion, but I feel that out of the group, I'm probably the most cynical about stuff like that because I'm a graphics snob and I want to play the newest and have the newer experiences, whereas Nick and Shane are more opt to play some of the older stuff, and Nick is really opt to play the older stuff and play it again, and Russ is kind of somewhere in the middle of that stuff.
I usually just kind of listen here to you guys go off on stuff because I'm pretty much simple. Once I play a game, I like Patrick, I'm pretty much good with it. There's only maybe a handful of games that I would ever really consider. Most of the games I've played that are remastered, I did not purchase. Thanks to game sharing and stuff like that, that's the only reason why I've played those remastered versions. The only remastered version I bought is Final Fantasy VIII. And that I probably actually has caused me not to go out and buy another one right away because it was barely updated. Though the nostalgia is fantastic and wonderful, and yeah, it's a pat on the back, it's great. But I would have much rather seen it really remastered. I mean, just truly, purely remastered. I mean, if Star Wars Galaxy has emulators everywhere, okay? I mean, there are playable emulators out there in this world. Now, everybody knows that's pretty much my single favorite game. But I'm not playing the emulators. I'm not going back because it's not what I look forward to. Thanks for technology in this. Thanks to technology in this world, I want to see. I want to see things more vibrantly. I want to see them. You know, I want to see the effort that's put forward to put these games together better and better. That's really where I sit with this whole remastered thing. If I play something, I'm pretty good. I mean, even Horizon Dawn, that one there, or God of War. God of War's come out with some DLCs and stuff, and I haven't gone back to play it. Those are games I really liked, but I haven't even gone back to play those. Why am I going to go back and play a game from 2001 that I played, like, like, was it Deus Ex or something like that? Like, if they remastered that or something, why am I going to play that? I want to see a new version, a better version.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more into. Yeah, I don't know. I guess
You like everything. I mean, that's
I
just
like
that.
everything.
That's
Yeah,
the thing
that's just really what it is. Because it depends on what I feel like. Like I said this morning, I started playing Mega Man 10. You know, and it just depends on what mood I'm in. Sometimes I'm in a mood for something old to play, an older retro game. Or sometimes I'll even be, those little minis that they have. I'll sometimes pop one of those on and start playing an old Nintendo or Super Nintendo game or Genesis game or whatever, depending on which mini I turn on. Yeah, just depends on the mood I'm in. So I'll pretty much play anything. Exactly right in that
Yeah,
sense.
and yeah, like I said, and for the most part, I don't go back to any of that stuff. Like I said, I kind of play up to date stuff. I try to play the newest stuff, or if I haven't played something, I will go back and play it. But that's just because I haven't experienced it yet. And for the most part, I'm stuck within the last 5 years. I don't usually go back to something that's 10 years old unless just something massive happened to it. I will some of the stuff like that. So a perfect example of that is like the Stellaris gaming series. It's it's been out for a long time, but they keep dropping these massive story expansions to the game, and I'll come back and play that. But to me, that's not the same as like a game like Final Fantasy, where it doesn't ever change. Final Fantasy VII is Final Fantasy VII. I played it now, and if I go back, if I in 10 years from now, if I wanted to play it again, nothing's changed on it really. But like if you look at like Stellaris, it's a grand strategy game. The story is going to change because how I play the game changes and the new mechanics they introduce change. So there's a difference in that style of game. The single player story driven games, I have no reason to go back to it.
Yeah, certain games with that are very story driven, I don't go back to either. It's the same. It's kind of the same way in that, or very rarely do I go back to those. You know, Games like God of War, like Russ was saying, and Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn, I played through it. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Played through it, beat the story. Once I did that, that was pretty much the end of it. Right? Last of Us 2, Last of Us Part 1. I only played through those games once, and probably will not play through them again. And I think for those, and for those, it depends on replay value, right? That's kind of for heavy story driven games like Last of Us and Last of Us 2 and God of War and stuff like that. I don't feel like they have a lot of replay value once you've beaten the game, right? Because if you go back to you pretty much experienced everything throughout the story, right? Because they're so story driven heavy. So once you play through the story, you pretty much experienced all there is to experience with it, right? Playing through it again is just if you want to experience the story again, which, unless the story is like that good that you need to experience it again, are you going to go back to playing that? For some people, yes. For me, no, typically.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that. I don't typically, even the greatest story games on my top list, I've only played like once, maybe twice if I'm lucky. Like my top favorite game is Horizon Zero Dawn. I've only played it twice because the first time I played through it was before they came out with the DLC, and I loved the story so much that when I came back, I'm like, I kind of forgot to play. Let me start over. But then I just kind of rushed it because I was like, oh yeah, I remember all this, but I'm playing the story again to get to the content. But for the most part, I don't replay those games as well. I agree. I don't have any. I don't have so the PlayStation exclusives. I don't have any desire to play through the game that we just recently gushed about, Ghost of Tsushima. I played it. I don't have any reason to go back and play it again. Same thing with Last of Us and all that. I'll play I'll play the Legends when it comes out, just because that's a different game and it'll be all of us playing together. But the single player story, I don't have any reason to go back to it. There's no replayability for me on stuff like that. Some games have multiple endings, and even then, I have a hard time doing replayability on some of that stuff because I get so bogged down with the game because I'm a check every corner kind of person that I get stuck with a game that'll take somebody 20 hours. It takes me 40 to play it.
Right. Yeah. And Ghost of Tsushima is a good example too. Yeah, I won't go back to it. I mean, I will for the Legends DLC that's coming out, but I won't replay the story again. And it's kind of like going back to that same thing where, kind of like me and you, and I think all of us here, we're kind of crazy when it comes to finding everything. Right. We check out every nook and cranny and every corner and everything. So by the time we finish the game, we have, we've seen everything. So there's no point in going back at that point. For those games, I just don't feel like they have a lot of replay value. Now, one thing too is like you think of Dragon Age, right? Dragon Age is the same story, same location and stuff, but I've played through Dragon Age, especially the first one, quite a few times, and that's just because of I think the replay value is in your party and stuff.
We you
how
to
you
play
build
different
out,
classes. Yeah.
right, and how you build out your party and everything, and that's what makes it fun. These other games, they have a very linear, even if they have upgrades and stuff, it's all very linear. Like Ghost of Tsushima, if you play through the story, you're more likely going to unlock everything in there. So there's not like a linear path that you have to choose as far as being some sort of like samurai or ninja or something like that. Then go from there. It's just a linear path. So I think for those games, I feel like once you've experienced the story, you've pretty much experienced it all.
Yeah, the story is definitely a decider for the game. Final Fantasy, I know that story backward and forward, but I still play it because everything about it I love. Last of Us Part 2, we'll never go back and touch it. Last of Us Part 1, I know everything about it, but I'll still go back and play it again. If they gave me a super ultra deluxe remaster 5.0 with all these bells and whistles, yeah, I'm gonna go back and play it. I just because it's
and I don't know great. I don't know if I could ever do that because I would be hard. It would be a perfect example of let's say that today the Final Fantasy VII that came out today is the one that in 10, 15 years from now they came out with a remake of that. I probably don't know if I would do it. I don't know. Is technology really going to improve that much? I mean, only time can tell. But it would. I'm not opt to replay a lot of remasters, remakes, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a tough call for me, to be honest, on remakes. I would have to probably have forgotten the game, and that's the only way I would redo a remake. But if it was one of like my beloved titles, I'm not sure that I would do it. I would, my top two favorite games. If they decided to remake those games, if they decided to remake Dragon Age or Mass Effect or Horizon, I'm not sure I would do it because I'm like, it's just not. I've already played it, but I don't know. It would just depend on time, I guess. Maybe 20 years from now would be a different story. But at its current state, none of those titles I would play a remaster of right now.
Dragon Age is probably one I would, and probably Mass Effect as well. Something like Last of Us, the first one, like same thing. Well, like you were saying, if they came out with a super duper deluxe ultra mega edition, but it was the same game, just looked better, I wouldn't play it again. I've already experienced it. What am I going? I'm basically at that point, I'm just going to experience the same game again, but with better graphics. And unless they added stuff to it.
That's like what I would refer to.
New story elements and stuff. Then I'd be like, oh, okay. Maybe I will play through it again.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It's hard to decide. Like I said, it's not happened, so it's hard for me to say if I will or won't. Because, in all honesty, I had no intention of playing the Final Fantasy VII Remaster. The only reason I played it was because of you, Nick, and Shane. You guys were just like beaming over the game and talking about it, and I'm just like. And in all honesty, if I had to have bought it, I maybe wouldn't have done it. But, I borrowed it and I loved it. And so it's got me hooked on the Final Fantasy series. And I will be buying Final Fantasy 16 the day it releases because of that. Because they tell amazing stories. And I'm definitely hooked on their gameplay now.
Yeah,
So,
they do. They do tell great stories, and even their weakest story is really a good story. I mean, it really is. Well, to me, the weakest Final Fantasy was 9. Um, but
Oh,
even
come
that
on.
one
13.
comparatively was. Do I?
13.
Ooh.
Is 13 has got to have the
I can't
weakest
speak to
story.
any of those.
Yeah, all right, I'll give you 13. I'll give you 13.
And
But
9 was better.
even their weakest link is still pretty damn strong.
It is.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not, even though 13 had a weak story, it's not like we didn't play through it.
Well,
yeah,
and they've gotten themselves
absolutely.
all the way up to 16 now for good reason, and with multiple remakes and remasters of certain games along the line, they're up to that number for a reason. They're good storytellers and good games. So, you know, it's definitely, I can't say for sure. I think that if they came out, my current opinion of this is if they came out with a Mass Effect remastered or a Dragon Age: The Original Origins remastered, currently sitting here, I would say no. But maybe seeing it, I'd be like, "Oh my god, it looks so much better than the original one that I'd have to." Because remember, I'm a graphics snob, so if I look at it and go, Dragon Age Origins is in my top 5 list. I played that game multiple times through, just like Nick said. I played it one time where I was the leader of the party. It's a sword and board guy. I played a sword and board dwarf, and then the second time through, I played a healer, so I could sit back and watch what was going on and just heal the people in the first one before they removed healers from the game in the next ones. But it's a hard call to make for me because I am honestly I'm not a DLC player. Um, just because I don't like to come back to a game I recently stopped playing. And when I say recently, I'm talking within the last 2 to 5 years. So uh, there's a reason because God of War, the latest one had a lot of. It was a really good game, but they have DLC out now, and I didn't go back to it, even though I really wanted to play the DLC. But it was just that game was an afterthought. After I quit playing it, I played through it. I'm like, I already played it. I'm done. Moving on. That's why I need a complete game when I play games.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I find it hard to purchase a DLC for something, God, a year old, 6 months old. If it was something that they came out with relatively quick when it was still something I was, wow, I'm into this, then I would probably consider it more, but not much.
Right.
Yeah, it depends on the game. Like, I bought the Control DLC, and, there's 2 DLCs for it, and I played through the first one, and now I'm playing through the second one, which is the Alan Wake experience. So, it depends, for me on DLC, it just depends on the game. If it's a game I really like, which I really like Control, then I'm more apt to play the DLC for it and possibly purchase it. If it's a game, but I mean, I really have to like the game. That's, it's one of those things. Like, if I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool, the odds of me buying DLC for it and also depends on how long it is until the DLC comes out, right? I mean, if 2 years go by, then they finally pop DLC, I'm like, I'm gone. I'm off on
Right.
a different game by now. You waited way too long to bring this out.
Oh,
Right,
absolutely.
exactly. And I'm exactly the same boat you are. It just depends on DLC. Like, if I'm still in the middle of playing game, I'll put in the DLC. But a lot of DLC requires you to reload the story or start over because it's like in the second chapter or act or early on, or you have to do these steps to get to it. And that drives me nuts because I'm already done with this game. I've moved on or whatever. So, so it goes back to that whole remaster thing that I want in the video game world. I want new experiences. That's why I play video game. I want new experiences. So for me to have that, I don't want to play a remaster. I will play a remake because for all intents and purposes, a true remake is a new experience. My really good example is something that I'm really familiar with, and that's the Resident Evil stuff. I played the original Resident Evils and I played the new remakes, and they are by and far different games, and so it's a new experience. And then, looking at videos of Final Fantasy VII, it is a remake. It is a new experience. It's not the same experience as you got before. Story is the same, but we've elaborated on the story, and we've read we're watching the extended version with director's commentaries, So it's tough call for me, and I don't do remasters because remasters have bitten me too many times. And then the new term that everybody's coming out with, or not necessarily even new, is the definitive edition garbage, and that just muddies the waters even more because the definitive edition is what whatever they want it to be is what it is. I definitely I could probably monopolize the topic on this for a long time because I have a love-hate relationship with the terminology and that the gaming industry uses when they decide to talk about something. So I think that probably wraps up the remastered remake session for us, unless somebody's got something they want to add. Nick, Russ, Shane, you guys got other topics that you want to bring up before we wrap this guy up?
Another topic we could spend 3 hours on, kind of angsty in a way, but no. I mean, I think I've got everything I wanted to say within that.
Shane?
I think we just need to set down a rule of laws about the definitions of remake and remaster and what you can and cannot do.
Yep, agreed, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's just, I hope they kind of stop with the remasters and if they're going to focus on bringing back old franchises or old games, either make a new title in that franchise or make a complete remake like the Final Fantasies and Resident Evils. Otherwise, just don't do it.
All right, so now that we've brought this discussion to a close, how many of you guys are going to play Black Mesa when it's over? We talked about it. I'm like, man, I've really been wanting to play that, but I just don't want to go spend the money on it. And now I'm like, I gotta go play this game now.
I have actually bought it
sitting in your
while
car?
talking about it. So not that I'm going to play it right away, but it is bought. So I did finally purchase it.
I threw it in my cart while we were talking and going, oh yeah, I haven't pulled the trigger yet on Steam on it yet. Nick's over there on his computer feverishly typing away like I had to get it.
Yeah. No, it's in my wish list still. I'll get it eventually, but I'm not going to right now.
All right, guys. Well, I think that wraps up this conversation. We appreciate everybody listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.